Hello, this is Pastor Bonner, and I want to thank you folks for tuning into our program today. Today we're going to do something entirely different. I have a special guest, and we're going to deal with some areas of suicide prevention, depression, PTSD, and as we've dealt with various people over the years on this subject, we want to share some things with you. We want to give you some websites, some phone numbers. Maybe you or a family member, friend or neighbor might be suffering through some things. We want to be a help to you. So if you want to even get a pad of paper and pen or pencil to jot down some information, maybe as we go during the program, as we put up some phone numbers and websites, you might want to jot them down. So you stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Well, we thank you for tuning in today. I've got a special guest, a good friend of mine, Bruce Williams. Bruce, it's so good to have you here today.
Nice to see you again, Pastor.
And Bruce and I have worked together over the last few years teaching classes on what? Suicide prevention, PTSD, depression. We've worked with different people in various fields. We've worked with some veterans and others. And so what we want to do today is talk about PTSD because it can affect a lot of people, not just those who are in the military, but it can affect a group of people. And you know, Bruce, I was thinking when we hear terms, and I've seen it on television, they talk about PTSD. So let's start off. Tell the folks what PTSD is, would you please?
PTSD is a post-traumatic stress disorder. That is, really what it is a group of emotional or physical symptoms that caused by exposure to trauma of any type.
Okay, and when we work with this, and I think of various people that we've worked with, again, you've got combat veterans, you've got police or firemen. They see traumatic things almost every day, do they not?
That's true. And Pastor, it can be, post-traumatic stress can occur among those people. It can occur among you and I. We could develop it. And the key is being exposed to a traumatic event like a fire, a natural disaster, a assault,
car accident.
A car accident, anything like that is a traumatic event can bring on, or it has the possibility of bringing on symptoms of PTSD.
Okay. And then sometimes also the spouses of policemen, firemen, or those in the military. And I've had times where I've even counseled with school children because they're worried that if mom or dad are deployed and they were in at this scenario, say Iraq or Baghdad or whatever, but now the kids are worried, will mom and dad come home alive? They just somehow, I've talked to kids that say, I just know I'll never see my mom again or my dad, whoever the parent is who's a soldier, and sometimes it's both parents.
That's true.
And so so it's not just those who've seen it, but it affects the families.
That's true.
And I've talked to different people over the years, and they go through these events, and they see it every day of their life. And so it's learning how to deal with it. When we come down to this, for example, what can happen from some of these symptoms, Bruce? What type of things?
Some of the symptoms that a person might develop, a person might develop one or a whole host of these symptoms. It would be things like being nervous, jumpy, very anxious, sleeping problems, mad at your family all the time, having what the psychologists call flashbacks, which are reliving the traumatic event, and feeling guilt or shame about the event that they were involved in, that maybe they should have done more. Had they done something more, then another person wouldn't have suffered in the traumatic event. Those types of things, plus many others.
Okay. And by the way, and I think I've got it on our introduction, but during the program, we're going to have some phone numbers and websites.
Yes, sir.
So if you're out there and maybe this pertains to you or one of your friends or family members, you can contact someone for help. We'll try to get some local numbers up there also. I was also thinking, Bruce, people I've dealt with that they'll say, for example, they'll threaten suicide, or maybe say something like, oh, I just want to die, nobody'd miss me, I've got too much stress. Now that doesn't mean if you have stress you're suicidal, but some people will threaten it and then they'll come back later and say, well, I didn't really mean it, I was just joking or kidding. So what do you do in a situation like that? I know what we've done, but maybe share with our people here.
That's very common, Pastor, that a person will make comments or make side remarks about ending their life, and they'll say it in a variety of ways, just like you mentioned. But you should take it seriously. Any even in a joking manner, or as a part of a conversation when somebody makes comments like, nobody cares about me, I'd like to end it all, or if the person exhibits some other behaviors like giving away some of their possessions, then it's a good time to be frank with them and be direct and ask them if they're thinking about harming themselves. And if they are, refer them, preferably take them to a facility that can deal with that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can talk to them about it, say, no, I was just kidding, I was just joking, but you still have to intervene.
That's true.
Because if you don't, we found times over the years where people have left it there and then the person has ended their life. And they say, well, I didn't do anything. They said they were just joking, they were just kidding, they were just, maybe just for that moment they were feeling that way. But if you don't find a way to get something done, oftentimes down the road, whether shortly or a little after, they'll end their life.
You know, Pastor, that's a good point. And what you said about the person right at that time, maybe they were feeling that way and they made the comment. They might not make it under another circumstance, but the truth is that comment about ending your life is not a normal thing to say to a person. And if you don't say something, down the road, the person they may be doing fine for hours, weeks, or months. Mm-hmm. They may have another moment when they start thinking about it, and you want to intervene with that before they go down the road and have suicidal thoughts.
Exactly. There's a lot of things, I know we've got a lot of information here, but a lot of things that sometimes there's a family history of violence, suicide. Maybe they have trouble concentrating or thinking clearly, trouble eating and sleeping, and a lot of it feeling helpless or hopeless. And when you look at someone's life, maybe they've tried previously, or you check it, maybe a few years ago or something, they tried to commit suicide. Maybe there might be a history of depression or mental illness. Now, and I didn't say this at the beginning, but you're a registered nurse. You have a master's degree in nursing,
yes,
correct?
Sir.
And so it's, as dealing with these things, you've got a lot of medical experience. Also, feeling alone, physical illness, and yet I thought a loss of a family member, like we were talking about catastrophic things, but there's still a divorce.
A divorce?
Someone dies unexpectedly, in the sense that, yes, it's always sad when someone dies and depression can set in, but all of a sudden a family member dies of a heart attack, gets killed in a car accident. Serious illness, skiing accident or something. So there's a lot of other areas. It's not just, say, like the accident, someone burning up in a fire, or seeing someone shot or killed in a war. So
that's true. There's many other things that can result in that. And as we're talking about post-traumatic stress and depression, often people wonder, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is really not that important, but the important point of that is about if a person experiencing post-traumatic stress symptoms does not get help, about 40 to 50% will develop severe depression. Mm-hmm. And it's another reason to intervene with the person. In our society, about 6 to 8% of the adults, if you look across the United States, about 6 to 8% have symptoms of PTSD, if you look at all adults. Now, if you contrast that with groups such as Vietnam War veterans, the rate of PTSD goes up to 25 or 30%. And then with people that, say, for instance, ambulance drivers and emergency services, the rate of PTSD can be 20 to 30%. So it varies a lot, and the numbers probably aren't all that important, but what they do indicate is that a lot of people have PTSD symptoms.
That's right. Earlier you mentioned flashbacks, and I was thinking that I've had sometimes people say, how long will I see this? And I'm thinking back several years ago where on a Veterans Day service I was preparing for at church, I'd interviewed some veterans in our church. We had some World War II and Korean veterans. Mm-hmm. And talking to this one gentleman, and he's since passed on, but he was in Tarawa and I think Okinawa and some of these Pacific islands, and he had never really talked much about it. Mm-hmm. But in talking about a little bit, I was trying to get some background information, but then he started opening up, and even his wife said to me later she hadn't heard some of those stories, and they were in their early 80s. But what he said to me was on the islands, and he was talking about the flamethrowers shooting him into the caves there while the Japanese were held up in there. and he was explaining how these Japanese would come running out of the cave on fire, screaming and yelling. And he said to me, he said, "Pastor, not a day has gone by in my life since then that I haven't seen what has happened and heard their screams and yells and smelled the burning flesh." And he was 82 or 3 years old. And I thought about that, you know, and when you deal with people who go through things, and yet it's learning how to deal with it.
It is.
And so I think in our second segment, because in about 2 minutes roughly, we're going to take a break, but in our second segment, we'll see where it goes, but maybe we might talk about some things that will help people who are watching out there on how we cope with some of these things. But do you have anything to add to what I've said, or something else you wanted to say, Bruce?
Well, that I would like to, thank you. Talking about the symptoms being long-lasting and with the military personnel and others, that is a way we function. Certain things will be imprinted on our brain, especially events that are traumatic and not what we expect and not what we've ever dealt with before. And the fact that they are long-lasting gives more power to the idea that people need assistance and need help to resolve these symptoms, so they don't carry those with them throughout their life. Exactly.
And so when we look at these factors and we look at the things that go on, and we will in the program be showing some referrals, and a lot of things that we might see with behavior changes and so on, but I'm thinking of people who do feel alone and helpless. I've dealt with people over the years where maybe a young girl, her parents have told her, "You're dumb, you're stupid, you're ugly, you'll never amount to anything." And when whether it's parents, aunts, or uncles, whatever, they beat someone down, whether it's a guy or a gal, if they get to the point in their life they have no hope, why am I here? They have no aim or purpose or goals in life, and they just feel like they're dirt. And I've had people tell me, "Pastor, I just feel like nobody would love me or want me," and they just sometimes just feel like ending it all. And so I've thought of examples where, yes, there is the traumatic, or there's the spouse or the child of those who've seen the traumatic, and then people who've been emotionally and mentally beat down by someone.
That's true, and you bring up a good point, because it's not only the physical abuse of the trauma or assault that we hear about and on the radio and the newspapers, but the emotional. Either a person that's kind of left to themselves, or, as you say, a person that is verbally abused or put down or not cared for properly can suffer symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
Exactly. And so in just a few minutes or a few seconds, we're going to take a break. But as these things come up on the screen, we'll try to get some of the statistics. Hopefully they've been up there. Some referrals will be in the second half. I think we want to maybe perhaps, Bruce, talk about maybe some solutions to the problem.
Let's do
some
that.
Things that would help the folks that are out there. And we want to thank you for tuning in. And maybe you're out there watching and you have been depressed, or you have had suicidal thoughts. Contact us, and there's help, and there is hope. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Well, here we are back from our break, and talking here with Bruce Williams. And again, Bruce is a registered nurse. You have your master's degree in nursing.
Yes, sir.
And as we said at the beginning of the program, as a pastor for years and in Bruce's medical field, we've worked with people who are depressed, people who've had PTSD, people who are suicidal. And we've taught various classes to various groups or organizations. And we've talked about a few of the symptoms, but Bruce, just kind of, I think maybe just recap a few of the symptoms, and let's give them some help and some hope and some solutions to the problems here.
Pastor, the symptoms of PTSD, and why we mention these, is so that people can recognize if a friend, a coworker, a loved one is experiencing PTSD. And of course, we're not trying to make counselors out of anybody, but it's very powerful. If you know these symptoms as a layperson, you may be able to identify somebody that's having problems and get them some help that they need. So some of the symptoms you might see is, and especially look for changes. You know a person fairly well, and you know how they act, but over time they start to change. Maybe they're restless, they can't sleep. Things like becoming irritable. You notice at work or at a family gathering or wherever that the person is irritable and jumpy and easily offended. There's other things like self-medication is common among people that have PTSD symptoms.
And I found too, people start withdrawing from friends and
That's
society.
right. That's
All of a
right.
sudden they become like a recluse. On the medicine though, I know when I've taught and done studies on this, you look at the side effects, and I know we're talking generally, a lot of times to me, in my opinion, the side effects, or pardon me, not the side effects, the medications often mask the problem.
That's true.
And some of the side effects that I have read can not always do, but can drive a person toward deeper depression and even toward suicidal thoughts.
That's true. And Pastor, that's why the medication on the box or on the bottle will most often have a warning on it about that this medication can deepen your depression or cause other untoward symptoms. So it's not a game, not a something to play around with. You have to be very sober about your decision, along with your physician or psychiatrist or counselor, about taking these medications and if they're actually needed.
Okay. Another thing too on the symptoms that just came to my mind, maybe to put a bit of a disclaimer that not everyone who's depressed is suicidal.
That's true.
Not everybody who's irritable is suicidal, but these things come into play. And so don't sit out there thinking, oh, my husband came home irritable, he must be suicidal. And I know we're being facetious, but common sense has to prevail.
That's
but
true.
when you start to see a lot of these symptoms on one person, and they start to withdraw, and they start to, I found people, they stay in bed all day, for example. They're depressed. They see no hope and no help. But just if you see one or two of these symptoms, that doesn't necessarily mean that person's suicidal. I mean, we all have down times. We all have down days.
We do.
But so I just thought about that because I'd hate for somebody to go out there and go, oh, my uncle stayed in bed till 9 o'clock this morning. He must be suicidal. No, maybe he was up till 2 in the morning
That's
working.
true.
So anyway, what can we talk about help and hope there, Bruce?
Well, that's really the name of the game when you're talking about post-traumatic stress and depression and those types of illnesses. And the important thing and what we can do and what the man on the street, the woman on the street, the layperson can do is, number one, recognize the symptoms. And as you said, Pastor, there will be some phone numbers and websites on the screen that will give people some facilities and helpful people that they can talk to. But in addition to that, in addition to recognizing symptoms, the very simple things of being helpful and supportive, giving the person the opportunity to talk about what's going on with them. You don't need to be real directive. You can just express a normal human concern and say to them, I notice you look and you're acting a little bit out of sort. Is there something I can help you with? So, and keeping the person involved or getting them back involved in day-to-day events, activities of normal living, making sure that they feel safe, they have shelter, they have food. Maybe this is a homeless person and you might have an opportunity to talk to them about that. Encouraging them if they are suicidal or they express or show some of these symptoms we've been talking about, they most likely need to have referral, and there are many different facilities and people that can provide a help to the person with PTSD.
And you mentioned finances too. We all remember reading the stories. I remember in history in high school the people who, when Wall Street crashed in '29, shortly thereafter, how many people jumped from skyscrapers and buildings or committed suicide. But it doesn't have to be a Wall Street crash. There's people who have more debt than bills at the end of the month. They see no hope, no way out. And look at the economy today with how many people are unemployed. People have lost their jobs. Various states have a much higher unemployment rate than here in Washington. I personally know people that when they had all this financial problem in 2008, people who have lost everything they've had. And
true.
so there's a lot of things. But one thing I wanted to share too, Bruce, that as Christians, sometimes I've run into people that will say, well, I'm a Christian, how can I get depressed, or how can I feel that way? And I've given a couple examples. And every 2 or 3 years at our church, I'll teach on worry, discouragement, depression, and suicide. But I said, Moses got so depressed he asked God to kill him. And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but he said, this is too heavy for me.
Yes.
And as all the burdens of the children of Israel were on him, and he asked God to take his life. And yet he was one that God used to give the Ten Commandments, the law, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And then I thought one of mine that I like, Elijah, when God sends down fire to destroy the altars of Baal and there's a great victory, then Jezebel sends out in my words, puts a contract out on his life. He says, you tell Elijah tomorrow at this time, he'll be as one of those prophets. In other words, tomorrow at this time, he's dead. After a great triumph, then sometimes we get attacked.
That's true.
And when you said earlier, keep him busy, he sat down, he moped, and he quit, and God sent an angel by to tell him, arise and eat, the journey's too far. In other words, he's saying, get up, get busy. God isn't through with you yet. And when we don't see hope and we don't see help, it's to a lot of people, it's time to check out. Life is over. But there's always help and there's always hope, isn't there?
There is. And without that hope and help, a person is really walking through the desert, because many times we don't have the facilities ourselves in us to carry on. And like you just said, a person may feel like they have no hope. There's nobody around to care for them. They're the only one that's suffering these symptoms. And of course, that's not true. Mm-hmm. And that's why when you have an opportunity to intervene, if you see a person with these symptoms, then it's a good time to intervene with them. And as you're talking with the person, and hopefully they're doing most of the talking and not you, but as you're conversing with them, it's important to let them know that these symptoms will pass. That with help, with hope, and with time, the symptoms will pass. And other people, lots and lots of other people have had these symptoms, but they are temporary.
That's right. And like you said, sometimes they think I'm the only one going through
That's
this.
True.
And that was true with the prophet Elijah. And he said, he talked about the other Israelites, and that he said, I'm the only one doing anything. I'm the only one serving God, and so on. And sometimes people feel I'm alone in this. Nobody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's all falling down on me and I can't handle it anymore. And they forget that other people are doing their job, but they just get to the place where it's just everything's about me, me, me. I can't do this, I can't do this, I see no way out. Nobody's helping me, nobody loves me, nobody cares for me type of a thing. And it's just, and the more they concentrate on it, the worse it gets.
That's true.
And I find if we get them engaged in meaningful activity, and it could be people who are off on, say, disability, they're off on unemployment. There's volunteer work to do.
That's true. It's extremely important.
And it could be at a church. You could go to a church. I've had times at our church where people say, they come by and say, you got something I can do. Whether it's picking up limbs or raking leaves or mowing the lawn or cleaning. And sometimes people, it's just like they need something to do that's meaningful. And there's a lot of organizations in the area that could use volunteer help. Serving food, say, at the Union Gospel Mission. There's living, what's that one? I'm thinking of the one that's an alternative to Planned Parenthood. And I can't, Life's Choices, you go. There's a lot of places that can use some volunteer help. And even if it's just for a few hours a week, but it gets you involved.
That is true.
And instead of sitting around staring at 4 walls, watching TV and being depressed all day.
Pastor, that's true. And many times when a person is depressed, if you ask them, they'll say, I don't feel like doing anything. Mm-hmm. They think that the motivation comes first and the activity second, but that's backwards. The activity, like you're talking about, volunteering, getting out, helping people in some way, getting involved in any meaningful activity is where the recovery starts. The motivation will come later on. But you have to be out there doing something, and it's much better if you're working with people.
Exactly. And when we look at faith and hope, and in some of the classes we did, and not only using scripture passages, but I went to newspapers and other sources, but I think it was Columbia University and some others did some studies that when people pray, it makes a big difference in their life.
Sure.
And we believe in God. We're Christians. We've trusted in Christ as our Savior. And if you're out there, and whether you're a Christian or not, let me tell you what. Number one, trusting God. Sometimes people say, where's God? Where's God right now? David felt that way. You read it in the Psalms. His detractors were tormenting him, and they're saying continually, David said, they say to me, where is your God? And so he didn't see hope and help for a while. And what I found, Bruce, is God is always there. It's kind of like the footprints
Always.
in the sand poem, you know. But he's always there. Sometimes we move away from God, but God is always there. If we feel separated from God, God is here. It's us who've moved way off out of the way. And God is there when we can come back to him. Prayer and faith, asking God's help. And I want to encourage you, if you get depressed, pick up a Bible and read a psalm a day. And if you could read, to me, that's one of the things, if you could read just one psalm a day, take you 3 to 5 minutes, except for Psalm 119, which I think has 150 verses, but you could read in just 3 to 5 minutes a psalm a day. You'll find something uplifting, you'll find something helpful in God's Word. But take your burdens and your cares to God. The Apostle Peter said, cast all your care upon him, because he cares for you. And God certainly cares for us, doesn't he, Bruce?
He certainly does. It's so important to remember that, like, as you said, that God is always there, and you have to be searching for him. That reminds me of what you just said of a man that was very depressed, couldn't sleep at night, and he wandered around the house and would read magazines and books, and that didn't fulfill him. So finally he sat down and took a look at the Bible, and the words of the Lord's Prayer came to him. And so he would recite the Lord's Prayer whenever he woke up or couldn't sleep. He would recite it 10 times or 100 times until he went to sleep. And eventually that, with some other activities, helped pull him out of his depression.
That's right. I've read stories, it's been a few years now, but you know, when you travel, you stay in a hotel or motel, there's a Bible that's usually in the drawer there. I think the Gideon's placed those there.
Yes.
But I've read accounts from them where sometimes somebody was alone at night and they were depressed, maybe suicidal, and the only book in the room, I mean, there's magazines, but there's a Bible where someone has turned to there, and they have some helps in the back, but through reading the Bible, God spoke to their heart, and they didn't take their life.
That's right.
And there's power in the Word of God, isn't there,
There is
Bruce?
great power.
Amen. Well, listen, do you got time to do this, Bruce? You think we want to do this? We got a few minutes. I picked up this a long time ago. It's a poem called Put the Glass Down. And so you have your burdens and your problems. I think they're in Hebrews where it says, lay aside every weight and the sin that does so easily beset us, and run with patience the race that's set before us. We have weight, and sometimes you think, well, my burden isn't too heavy. But here's what we want to do. Bruce, go ahead and pick up that glass. That glass maybe weighs 4, 5, 6 ounces, and it doesn't matter the weight, but it depends on how long you hold it. So let's say if you hold it for a minute, it's okay. But you keep holding that glass, and if you hold it for an hour, probably in your left arm there, you're going to hurt. I don't know, you starting to feel anything yet?
I can feel the pressure.
Yeah, now, if you hold it for a few hours, it's worse. If you hold it for an entire day, hey, you might have to call an ambulance. But it's the exact same weight. That we have put no more water in there. That's a styrofoam cup, but the longer you hold it, the heavier it gets and the heavier it feels. And it's the same way with our burdens. And if we carry our burdens all the time, sooner or later, we're not going to be able to carry them. So what we have to do sometimes, are you feeling anything in that arm?
Yeah, I feel it.
And you've only
here.
been, what, for 30, 45 seconds? But sometimes you're carrying your weight and your burden, and like the Apostle Paul said in the book of Hebrews, lay aside the weight that drags you down. It's in my words, but go ahead and put it down, Bruce. What you have to do is put it down, rest for a while, give your burdens to the Lord. You had to rub it there.
A little bit.
That was just for maybe 30, 40 seconds or a minute. But you have to give your burdens to the Lord and put them down periodically, or you can't cope with life. So you go to work and you have all these problems. Hey, leave your burdens there. Sometimes we take the workload home with us.
We do.
And I think that's common practice. But sometimes we just have to leave it there. And sometimes we might have to take work home and do it, but and get our tongue tangled too in the way. But take our work home and do it. But there's office politics, there's gossip, there's all this stuff. It's like this is weighting us down. Leave it there.
That's
you just
true.
have to, and because when you bring it home, it annoys the wife and the kids.
That's true, Pastor, and it's important. It's like flipping a switch, like turning a light off in your office room or wherever it is you work, warehouse or wherever it might be. When you leave, turn off that switch of the gossip and the cares of the day and the bills that you're taking care of at work and the dealing with the boss. And on the way home, switch your mind and do it consciously. Start thinking about the other things in your life, anticipating being home with your family, with your spouse, the other things that you have going on, hobbies and those types of things, and practice of switching your mind to a whole other way of thinking about your personal life and the good things, the very positive things in your life. Will help if you're having some emotional difficulty, and it will certainly help prevent it if you don't have it. So
Sure.
it makes your life much more pleasant.
That's right. And I hate to come home and you get so all bent out of shape and bring it home. The dog gets mad and bites you or something like that. It could happen. But you know what, Bruce? Two things we're going to share. That life is short.
It is short,
and we only have one chance to go through this life. So make the best of it. And if you're out there listening and this is making sense to you, or you're having some problems in these areas, you can contact us. Our church number will be on the screen, and we'll have some of these other websites and phone numbers, maybe a couple 800 numbers, a couple local numbers. But Bruce and I have taught various classes, and we've taught, I don't remember the length of them, but we've taught several classes together, yes, on PTSD and depression. But if you're interested in having Bruce and I come and teach a class for your group or organization, call us at Bible Baptist Church. Bruce goes to a different church, but what I'm saying, we've worked together as a team. True. He knows the Lord, and we work well together, but we do teach some classes. And so if you're interested for your group or organization, contact me, and I'll get with Bruce. We'll see what we can do, because we want to help you. And so anyway, we appreciate you tuning in. We've just given you probably in roughly 20 minutes of time in the two segments, just a few things regarding PTSD and depression, but we want to be a help to you. And there's a lot of people that are struggling out there. Bruce, in the closing minutes, do you have anything else to add?
Well, yes, thanks, Pastor. I do, and that is, again, become aware of the symptoms of depression and PTSD, and then also what you can do about it as a lay person, as just what the normal interested person would do. And on the website, you'll notice that there are some phone numbers and websites and various places that you can contact that will help you become more knowledgeable. That, as Pastor said, we would like you to feel comfortable talking with another person that has some of these difficulties that we're talking about. Like, for instance, National Center for PTSD would be one, and there are many others, but the Veterans Center, the Veterans Clinic, and many other local, state, and national organizations that can help you out. But considering PTSD, the National Center for PTSD is an excellent resource on the computer, and it's at www.ncptsd, and that'll be on the website to make you feel more comfortable about handling.
Well, yeah, we'll show it up on the screen. We'll have all of these on the screen here. And also, if you're attending church somewhere, get with your pastor or one of the leaders there in your church. And there's the local vet center and some of these others. I hear the Mayo Clinic. You can go online for that. And so there's a lot of things that where they work with this. And so we want to be a help to you. So all these websites and phone numbers will go up on the screen.
They will.
Somewhere during the program. And probably as we're talking at this toward the end, so you could jot those down. You can give me if you want to reach Bruce, it'd probably be easier as we talk to contact me through work.
Sure.
With our church phone number, and I'll get with Bruce on that. And if there's any messages or anything, we work together.
Pastor, can I mention something here? There was a study done a few years ago, and took a look at people that had post-traumatic stress, depression, and those types of symptoms. And when those people were questioned, 80% said their first contact concerning their issues was with a pastor. And pastors are a powerful resource in helping people with PTSD.
That's right. And some people neglect that. There's a lot of good counselors, but we also have to go back with faith-based and with your clergyman, your pastor.
That's true.
And because most pastors are trained in counseling and some sort of psychology and so on and so forth. And as myself, I'm a board-certified counselor and a pastoral therapist. I have to look on whatever they got written there, but I do my thing. But I tell you what, and Bruce in his medical field is very well, highly qualified. And so don't just sit there and do nothing. But if this is you or one of your family members, get involved and get something done. Well, Bruce, it's been a pleasure having you with us.
Pastor, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so very, very much.
You're very welcome.